So welcome everybody, and after Judy will lead us in some like beginning with music, we're going to start Psalm number 2 today. How exciting is that? I'm thrilled. Judy, would you like to lead us?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. I am thinking about Passover, since Passover is a mere, how many days away? 9, something like that, 8, a week from Wednesday night. So I'm thinking about songs that are both Passover and some of them Psalms as well. And I was drawn to Psalm 118. You'll see it on the chat box there. I put the words. Psalm 118, verse 14. It's also found in Shemot in Exodus 15, verse 2. Ozi v'zimrat yah, v'yehi li lishua. If you look at the bottom of the text I put in, you'll see from 1917 a translation that's still common. The Lord is my strength, Ozi, and my song, and God will become my salvation. So we've done this together at CBST. Join me. You can do harmonies on your own. We're still on mute, but it's both in the Psalms that are found in the Seder, as well as just a wonderful psalm. Ozi vezimrat yah, vayehi lishua. Ozi vezimrat yah, vayehi lishua. Ozi v'zimrat yah, vayehi lishua. Ozi v'zimrat yah, vayehi lishua. This is Rabbi Sheffa Gold's melody. You can see her translation there as well. Ozi v'zimrat yah, vayehi lishua. God is my strength and my song. God will save me. Ay, ay, ay. We pray. Ay, ay, ay. Ay, ay, ay. Ay, ay, ay. Ay, ay, ay. Hallelujah. 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 Thank you.
Thank you so much, Judy. It's so beautiful. And everybody has to mute your microphone. Learn the etiquette and the discipline of doing that as soon as you get on any Zoom call. We're all getting used to these new ways of being together in order to make it work. So very happy to join everybody today. I hope you had a meaningful Shabbat and weekend. Well, our physical environments don't change in these days. I'm grateful that Shabbat brings us some significant difference. And so for those of us who joined us Friday night for services, you saw we're trying different things. Some of them are working, some of them aren't so much, as we're trying to try on this new way of creating a big prayer space together for hundreds of people via a technology that doesn't allow us even as leaders to be in the same place. So we're trying hard, and feedback is always appreciated. So today we're moving on to Psalm 2. And like we did with Psalm 1, we'll start each day with reading it through in Hebrew, and then with whatever English translation or vernacular you have in front of you. But I forgot to do this on Thursday, but we want to always do this, is to start studying by imagining and thinking and invoking the name of somebody in whose honor or memory we're studying today. It's a way of honoring the memory or honoring somebody who's alive or somebody's memory who's dead. So if you want to dedicate your study this morning in honor or memory of somebody, typically it's done in memory of somebody, please mention it in the chat so that we can all see in whose memory you're studying today. And if you have something to say about them, we'd love to hear it. So we're going to start with Psalm 2. And Psalm 2 has 12 verses. So it's double the size of Psalm 1. And so let's start it together. We'll start in Hebrew, Psalm 2. Lama ragshu goyim uleumim yehegu rik. Yityatzvu malchei eretz veroznim nosdu yachad al Adonai vial mishicho. Nintka et mosrotemo v'nashlecha mimenu avotemo. Yoshev bashamayim yischak, Adonai yil'ag lamo. Az yidaber elemo ve'apo, v'charono yivhalemo. Va'ani nasachti malki al Tzion har kodshi. Asapra el chok Adonai amar elai, bini ata ani hayom yiliditcha. Sha'al mimeni v'etna goyim nachlatecha v'alchuzaktecha afsei aretz. Troem b'shevet barzel, kichli yotzer tinaptsem. Va'atam lachim haskilu, hivasru sof te aretz. Ivdu Adonai be'ira v'gila bir'ada. Nashku var pen ye'naf v'tovdu derech ki yiv'ar kimat apo ashrei kol chosei vo. Okay, now we're going to do it whatever English you have in front of you or any vernacular. Okay, read it out loud. The idea in Jewish prayer is that you're supposed to speak so that your own ear can hear, not just say it silently. Why do the nations congregate, and why do peoples think of worthless mysteries? Why do the earth's kings set themselves and the rulers take counsel together against Adonai and against those anointed, saying, let us remove their bands and cast away from us their cords. He who sits in heaven will laugh, my master will mock them. Then he will speak to them in his anger, and in his rage he will terrify them. But it is I who have anointed my king upon Zion, my mountain, and I will tell of the decree. Adonai said to me, you are my son, I have this day begotten you. Ask of me, and I will give you nations as your inheritance, and your possessions will extend to the ends of the earth. Break them with a rod of iron as a potter's vessel, shatter them. Now therefore, kings, be wise, be admonished judges of the earth. Serve Adonai with fear and rejoice with trembling. Do homage and purity of heart, lest he be angry and you will be lost on your way. For God's wrath is kindled suddenly. Fortunate are all those who take refuge in him. Now, you might be saying to yourself, I have no idea what this psalm is about. This seems so dense and obscure. Well, that's what studying psalms are like. Watch where you'll be when we emerge after spending some time with it. My first question that I asked everybody to consider, for those of you who are classical music fans, this psalm is prominent in two very important classical music pieces. So anybody know, you might not recognize on your own, but maybe you do. Screen sharing should be limited to hosts only. So can we limit the screen sharing to hosts only?
Yep, doing it right now.
Yep, that should be done. We need to do that before every Zoom call. All right, I'll wait till we've solved this. So by the way, I told our staff this morning, We have now heard that there has been anti-Semitic attacks on Jewish synagogues and Jewish groups and organizations who use Zoom. And people have gone in and shared pornographic and otherwise anti-Semitic screens. So we have to limit the ability for everybody to screen share to only the hosts. And that has to happen before these meetings so that nobody could, what's now being called Zoom bombing. So it only took 2 weeks of this for there to already be anti-Semites figuring out how to use it. So Bruce, I ask you before every Zoom call to make sure that screen sharing is limited to hosts so we don't have either mistakes like that one was just a simple mistake, but nobody else can enter our call. Okay, you classical music lovers, for a cup of coffee with me when this is all over, what classical music pieces, there are two I'm thinking of, and maybe there are more. I'm an intermediate, so you guys might know more than I do, that this psalm is important in. Sherry, you had your hand up? You have to unmute yourself, Sherry.
Handel's Messiah.
Exactly. Handel's what? Simon, yes. Simon sings Handel's Messiah every year in Carnegie Hall. I had the pleasure of experiencing that. Beautiful. So this is used in Handel's Messiah. For those of you who love Handel's Messiah, you might recognize it when we'll talk more about that. I'm not going to explore it right now, how Handel's Messiah uses it, but there are several verses from this psalm which are significant in Handel's Messiah. And Simon, maybe when we get to them, we'll talk more about that and how maybe you'll even sing them for us.
Rabbi Dave Grotel has another suggestion.
Okay, who does?
Dave Grotel.
Okay, would you unmute yourself, Dave?
Yes. So when I was in high school, we sang Leonard Bernstein's Chichester Psalms.
Exactly.
And I still, Lama Ragashu Goyim, Lama Ragashu. It still goes through my mind. So.
Yay! I knew this crowd would crack it.
Yes.
The first verse of Psalm 2, Bernstein in Chichester Psalms uses it very powerfully to contrast to Psalm 23. So the music contrasts when the boy soprano sings Psalm 23, which we have 21 Psalms to go to get to Psalm 23. So I can't talk about Psalm 23 in Chichester Psalms, but in the movement in which the boy soprano sings Chichester Psalms, and by the way, we will play that because that's so spectacular when we get to Psalm 23. The boy soprano sings a very sweet, comforting, beautiful version of Psalm 23. Everybody who knows it knows what I mean, right? But then crashing into it, David, would you do that again? Would you sing that again? The first verse of Psalm 2. Look at the verse of Psalm 2. David, go ahead and sing it. So you've heard the beautiful Psalm 23 sung sweet, 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 sweet. And then Psalm 2.
Lama Ragashu Goyim, Lama Ragashu. That's what I remember.
That's excellent. It's very, I don't have the music words for it, but it's very aggressive. It's very rough. And so the contrast between the beauty of Psalm 23 and is Adria Benjamin on this call? Is Adria here? Oh, well. So the first line, we have the beauty of God will be with us in all these beautiful places. Staccato, that's the right word. Staccato, thank you. And then the Lama Ragashu is in contrast to the beauty of this Psalm 23. Why do the nations Ragashu? We'll figure out what Ragashu means, but why are the nations so engaged in violence and in conflict? And why do people do these empty things? So Bernstein does this genius musical contrast between Psalm 23 and Psalm 2. For those of you who do love classical music, I urge you today, in any spare time you might have, to listen to Chichester Psalms. Maybe somebody could write that in the chat. For those who are not familiar with it, there are YouTube versions of it, and listen for the Psalm 23, Psalm 2 contrast. And does somebody have the handle queued up to these verses? Is that what somebody's telling me? And it's tell us which verses it is.
Peter Klein.
What does Peter Klein have? Sorry, I can't see the chat. So I just, oh, David is telling us which minute to go to when you listen to a YouTube of the Chichester Psalms. That's fantastic, David. It'll be different, of course, on every version, but this contrast is beautiful. Bernstein was such a deep liturgist, and his knowledge of Jewish things was very profound. So I don't know if we can listen to, well, maybe I can't tell if we can actually listen to Handel's Messiah for these verses, but let's start studying them. So I don't know if it's in any other classical music pieces, but these are the two really famous ones that use Psalm 2 that I know of. I'm sure we'll have others. Ira would like to one day, he's going to do a presentation about the Psalms and classical musics all together, and you'll see the powerful use of Psalms in very, very famous classical pieces, as well as some very obscure ones. So it's that's a huge discussion. Okay, let's start with verse 1. Lama. So the first verse 1, and remember there are 12 verses, so we're going to want to look for the arc in the verse. And remember some of the things that we learned from Psalm 1. We're going to look for the structure of sentences to see if there are clauses that either contrast or explicate each other. And we're going to look at the use of words to talk about the negative people and the positive people. Always remembering, and somebody brought this point up, that every psalm is simultaneously functioning on a personal internal description and can be read as a personal interior struggle when it talks about the struggle of good and evil, as well as an external issue about the struggles of good and evil. So, and the language at first, whichever translation you're working with, will be helpful or not, but we know all translation is interpretation. Nobody has the exact right one. So let's start this. So lama ragshu hagoyim. Now, lama means why. Very simple word for why. We're not going to spend a lot of time on that. Ragshu goyim. So what does the word goyim mean? Somebody raise your hand and tell me, what does goyim mean?
The non-Jews, it's the other people.
It's the other people typically, but sometimes it actually just means nations, which could include the Jewish nation, but mostly it means, as Sandy rightly said, and certainly in Yiddish, it has, how shall we say, a bit of a negative connotation, right? So in Yiddish, we would pronounce it goyim. And is Yael Bat Chava on the phone, on the call? If Yael, as our Israeli,
yes, I'm here.
How would you pronounce this in Israeli Hebrew?
Goyim.
Goyim. So you hear, one of the things that Israeli Hebrew does is the accent is always, except when it's not, as all grammatical rules have the exceptions, primarily focuses the emphasis on the last or the second syllable, depending how many syllables in a word. And Germanic languages, of which English is one, and Yiddish is another. Notice how I'm emphasizing English, Yiddish. Our emphasis in English and Yiddish and all Germanic cognate languages, our syllable emphasis is the first one. So I kind of tried to make that as an emphasis. I'm not sure that was clear. So for those of you who have not studied a lot of language, this might seem a little weird. And for those of you who have studied a lot of language, this is why Americans speak Hebrew in a way that Israelis think sounds funny, even if an American is fluent, because getting the syllable emphasis is completely different from English. So, like I said, and Yiddish. Yiddish is more like English because it's Germanic, and English is a Germanic language with Roman vocabulary, but we are a German cognate language, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so this is why it's interesting. On a famous word like goyim, which we say all the time in Yiddishized Hebrew, or Ashkenazi Hebrew, because Ashkenazi Hebrew is influenced by German and Yiddish pronunciation, we would say goyim. But Yael, would you say how an Israeli would pronounce it again?
Goyim.
So the emphasis is on the second syllable. And that's true all the way through Hebrew. A big question gets asked all the time. how was biblical Hebrew pronounced? If we could hear somebody who lived in the day that the Psalms were being written, would they have pronounced it with the emphasis on the final syllable, like Yael pronounces it? Or would they have pronounced it on the first syllable, like as an American I would do comfortably, and if I'm trying to pretend I could speak Israeli Hebrew, I'll work on it, but I'll give you other examples. Mazel tov, right? That's how we who are speaking a Yiddishized Hebrew, we would say Mazel tov. Yael, do you mind being my Israeli example? Since you'll be more authentic than mine. How would you say
Sure.
Mazel tov?
Mazal tov.
See, emphasis shifts from the first syllable to the second syllable. Take another famous word, right? Shabbos. If I'm talking about Shabbos as a Yiddishized word, Yael, how do you say Shabbos?
Shabbat.
So Yael does it two ways differently. The emphasis is on the last or the second syllable. And by the way, if you speak other languages, you can ask this question of all languages, right? Where is the emphasis put? English, like the word English, we emphasize the first, that's only one syllable. We emphasize the first syllable in English. And Americans are terrible in learning foreign languages. The worst problem we have is shifting that emphasis and learning how to shift when we go to another language. It's very hard. It's the music of the sentence that's so different. And why are Israelis so good at shifting to American English, even if their emphasis on the second syllable? Well, they watch a lot of American TV in Israel, let's be honest. They hear it very early, but the music of a language is really hard to shift. So Shabbos, as Yael pronounces it, Shabbat, she's changing the emphasis, but the other big difference is that the taf, the final letter in Ashkenazic Hebrew, is pronounced a s sound, but in Sephardi Hebrew, or Hebrew that Israelis speak, it's pronounced t. Shabbat versus Shabbos. Big question. When people spoke Hebrew in biblical days, did they speak it Shabbos-like, or did they speak it Shabbat-like? Was the t of the Shabbat a t sound, or was it a s sound? And we'll see the significance of this as we explore the Psalms as poetry and try and understand what did the speakers of this time, how would they have pronounced these poems? Another question, which we don't have time for today, which is, why did Ben Yehuda, who invented modern Hebrew, use the accent he did? And so that Yael speaks Hebrew the way she speaks. Why don't we speak Israeli Hebrew like Ashkenazi Hebrew, which was most of the people who were coming to Israel in the 1890s and 1900s, who were creating the modern language of Hebrew? Where did that accent even come from? Interesting questions, huh? Bet you never thought about that. Okay, so Lama Ragshu Goyim. So Goyim with the emphasis, I'm going to ask that question. We're going to question Umim Yehegu Rik. Now, remember I said, so here we're looking at the two phrases of one sentence. What are the two phrases? Each has three words. Lama Ragshu Goyim. I don't have one that has the trup on it. I should look at the trup here. Let's see if I have another. I left it in the other room. But so I assume there's an etnach at Goyim.
There's an etnachta under Goyim.
Right. Okay, an etnachta, which is we talked about last week, that's kind of like this semicolon. So making clear that the verse is three words. I mean, the clause or the phrase, Lama Ragshu Goyim. And the second phrase has three words, Ulu'umim Yehegu Rik. Now, notice in both verses, there's a word for peoples or nations, but they're different words. One is Goyim and Umim, which is another word for peoples. Notice in the beginning of this phrase, again, is that Vav. For those of you who are the Hebrew readers, which is, we're not going to talk about why it's pronounced it doesn't matter for right now. But again, it's one of those separating, in modern Israeli Hebrew, it's just translated as end, which is not nuanced enough for biblical Hebrew. For biblical Hebrew, whenever you see the word that can be end, It can be translated as rather, but, therefore, because of. It's a relational word that you can only figure out what it's trying to say from the context. So l'umim yehegu rik. What does the word rik mean? Anybody know? It has some rik means emptiness. We talk about Joseph was thrown into a bore rake, into an empty pit. So there's a sense of emptiness. So why do the peoples or the goyim, whatever that is, ragshu, there's a sense of, Yael, what do you as an Israeli, how would you translate the word ragshu with modern Israeli?
Got excited.
Got excited. It's used a lot in modern Hebrew for feelings and, so why did the peoples, my translation interestingly says congregate. What do your translations say? If you have a different translation in front of you, so Yael has got excited. Raise your hand. Let's hear another translation. Rage. Write them down. Gather. That's good. Put them in the chat. That's a good way. Plot. Oh, this is a good way to do it. I'm learning. Mutter in vain. Interesting. Uproar. See, the uproar is hearing the ragshu. In an uproar. Interesting. Assemble. Rush around restless. Wow, such great translations. Nations shout. Why do people gather? Erupt. Conspire. So you can see this word is a key word that nobody really knows exactly what it means, but trying to get plot vein things, throng. So there's a feeling there that we see, the murmur in vain is probably for the next sentence because there's a contrast. Ragshu definitely has some feeling of tumult, as excited, uproar. But the next verse, and the peoples, or also plural, yehegu reik. Now the word yehegu, we saw this in the first psalm. Let's look back to Psalm 1. Where did we see this word before in the first psalm? Anybody remember where in verse 2 of the first psalm, we have yehegeh, yomam valayla. It's the same root, the same word. We're going to see this word a lot through the psalms. So this is yehegu, meaning contemplate for a long time, meditate, spend time thinking, focusing on. And the second phrase, so why did the first phrase is, why did the peoples are in tumult and excited and uproar? And the second phrase, and the peoples murmur, focus on emptiness. So you can feel that poetic contrast, right? The second is emptiness. There's this feeling of there's nothing there. The first part of the verse is, so that's why I think people who said what are your different translations for the second phrase of the verse? Yehegu reik, or reek. It's reek. Why do the nations assemble? That's for the first sign. People plan in vain. That's the second phrase. Other translations of that? I love this, using the chat this way. How exciting is this? Is that Darina on the phone too? On the call? Wow, Darina, you're calling in from Bulgaria, is that right?
Yes, Darina's in Bulgaria. Do you want to?
Wow. What time of day is it in Bulgaria right now?
6 hours earlier, 6 hours later.
Wow, well, welcome. So happy to have you. So talk in vain. All right, so we have a sense of a description. The two ways the psalmist is saying peoples who don't have spiritual depth exist in the world. 7 hours, because you don't do daylight savings time. It's 7 hours difference. So, so there are two different ways the psalmist is describing a disconnect from things that are holy. The first is tumult, excitement, filled with words. There's a sense of it's filled with blah, 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 blah. And the second is emptiness. All right, so the phrases are existing as somewhat of a contrast, one speaking more of the other. Okay, verse 2. Yityatzvu malchei eretz, roznim nosdu yachad. Okay, this gives me a chance to talk a little bit about the structure of biblical Hebrew as a language that's very different than English. Biblical Hebrew is described as a verbal language, not a nominal language. By nominal, I mean nouns. It means that the beauty and creativity of Hebrew is most seen in the use of verbs. English is completely the opposite. English has 300,000 nouns in English, in modern English, I'm told. Most people speak, I think, with 8,000 words in English. But the English language is rich with nouns, is rich with ways to describe things. And when a great poet writes great poetry, we see profound use of nouns mostly in English. In Hebrew, it's the opposite, kind of. And I'm simplifying to make a point. But the way that verbs are used in Hebrew are the way we see the great creativity of a writer. And mostly in biblical Hebrew, we see a verb start sentences, not nouns. So in English, the way we would say a sentence is noun, verb, object. You know, I played ball is the common way to say an English sentence. Obviously, there are many exceptions and reasons we wouldn't do it. But if I say I played ball, that's a pretty normal sentence. You wouldn't notice anything strange about that. Biblical Hebrew would typically organize the sentence and say, played I ball, that the verb usually comes first. And if there's a reverse of that, it's for emphasis. So this sentence, Yityatzvu malchei eretz, the verb comes first, then the noun. And that's very typical, and we'll see it over and over again. The verbs are emphasized. So Yityatzvu, we're not going to focus too much on the verb here, but it's malchei eretz. The kings, malchei is like melech, malachim. We use that a lot when we sing Shalom Aleichem. Malchei eretz, the kings of the earth. V'roznim nosdu yachad. Roznim are some kind of rulers, some kind of leaders. Nosdu yachad. Nosdu is an interesting word, and it has something to do with foundation or council or yachad, together. Al Adonai. Now, which name of God do we see here? Again, the 4 letters name of God. Right, Yud, He, Vav, He. Remember, I spoke about in the first Psalm, that's the ineffable, the unknowable, the unpronounceable name of God's presence in the universe. Uh-oh, my dog wants to come in to study with us. Hold on a second. Come on, Penny. All right, Penny, say hello. Penny wants to say hello to everybody. She probably wants to come in. Okay, so this is the first time we come to the reference of the Jewish people or Israelites or people who are connected to Yud He Vav He. And again, I emphasize what I did in the first Psalm. By Yud He Vav He, it's really, oh, Sharon, I love your little, your placeholder there. Yud He Vav He means those who are looking to, my doggie's name, by the way, is Penny. That was Penny. I have 2. This is Bella. They're both studying with us. Okay. So why do the people who don't have Yud He Vav He as the focus of their lives, and by this meaning who have holiness, who are those who increase holiness and sacredness in the world as opposed to withdraw it, Al Adonai, in this sense, it means against God. or against the Holy One, V'al Mashicho, and against those that literally he has anointed. I'm going to stop there and ask for questions, or if there are questions in the chat, Harold, if you want to bring them up. As we just did 2 verses, I want to hear.
I don't think we have any questions in the chat at the second. If anybody has a question, we're down to our last 7 minutes. They can raise their hand and we will recognize them. Sarah Siegel, unmute yourself. You have a question.
Yes, hi. Thanks to everyone.
Hi, Sarah.
Rabbi Kleinbaum. Hi. So Mashiach, it sounds like Mashiach to me. That's interesting.
So the word Mashiach, which is the Hebrew word for Messiah, is anointed one. Messiah is the anointed one. So that's exactly the same word. So this is, it doesn't always mean Messiah, it means anointed one. And we know that people were anointed for different purposes in the ancient world. But you're absolutely right. Good ear.
Any other questions? Raise your hand.
Karen Klein has.
Okay. Karen Klein, and then Marcia, and then Benjamin. Karen, are you up? Unmute yourself. Marcia, why don't you take it?
Yes, Rabbi. I think you said in the second verse that the second, that it refers to not the Goyim, but I'm not clear where you're
Well, it doesn't.
understanding
No,
people.
So here it will mean the general peoples. I was just saying there are times where it doesn't only mean the non-Jews. In this case, it probably does.
Benjamin
Okay.
had his hand up.
I thought you were saying.
No, but we'll get even deeper on this as we go through the psalm. But it's what that word means, what it means when it talks about peoples. We'll get more complicated. I promise. How shall we say, complexify it.
Benjamin Shafran, you've had your hand up for a while. Why don't you unmute yourself and ask your question or make your comment?
It's more of a comment than a question. Verse 2 is actually very much connected to verse 3.
Yes, it is.
And I think that would be a good stopping point.
Well, I'm not sure we have, I'm concerned we don't have time to get through verse 3. That's why I stopped now, and you'll have to wait. And this is like a cliffhanger. Consider this a psalm cliffhanger. But you're right. Absolutely. It's just, I was looking at the clock. I don't think I have time to get through verse 3. So I'm just stopping now, and we're going to continue.
Okay.
Karen Klein, do you have your hand up?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I would just like to say how thankful and how grateful I am to be with what I consider my home synagogue going back 20 some odd years. And because of you people and because of my Rabbi Kleinbaum, a year ago last week, I had my bat mitzvah. I came to CBST knowing one prayer and one whatever, and Rabbi Kleinbaum just instilled in me this unwavering desire to find out as much as I could about my religion. I am in Torah study every Saturday. My Hebrew is not so good. It's about 3 or 4 words, so this has been a little over my head, but so has everything, but it's a starting point. So I thank you all, and some familiar faces are there, and I'm just really grateful to be here.
Wonderful.
So,
Karen, where are you living now?
I'm in Port Washington.
Uh-huh.
As a matter of fact, Rabbi Zeplowitz just dropped off mando bread that his wife made, and she's an internationally famous baker, and I'm trying not to go into the kitchen to eat the whole thing.
Yeah, I think a lot of us are spending a lot of time looking into our refrigerators, huh?
Rabbi, if I could take a minute for just a housekeeping issue or two.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm now going to put in chat a Google form for giving me your email. I got 30 emails on Thursday from people who wanted to go on our email. If you just go to that form and enter the information, you will go on an email list, which we will be using to keep track of people, to send out information, links, etc. It would be very much appreciated. And that was my big announcement.
Looks like there's a problem.
Sorry, my Google just went off. So that's the one housekeeping thing. If you can do that, that would be great. Oh, the other thing is that Sasha and I are working with Dave Grotel. We've got some beautiful translations of Psalms. We are going to be finding a place to put them up so that we can share them. There's also an idea that we will do a moderated private Facebook group for here so that people can go in, they can post things and they can interact, not publicly. Just put your thumbs up if you're on Facebook and you would like a Facebook group for the Psalms class. Okay. We will do that too. All right, those were the two housekeeping items. We do have class today through Thursday with the rabbi. The rabbi on Friday is not with us. She's preparing for services, but either Sasha or I will be TAing. And this Friday, if you want, you can join us. It'll be in the email to come and look at people's translations and discuss them.
Beautiful. Thank you for doing that, Harold and Sasha. And all right, I think that's it for today. Keep studying Psalm 2 today. Listen to some of the music that Psalm 2 has been used in. And I might say for those, if we have some Christian folks on this call, this Psalm is very important in the Christian tradition in particular. And you'll see why as we go through it. But Judy, would you lead us out with, shall we do Ozi again?
Sure, I just put the words back up to everybody on the screen. Thank you again, Rabbi. I want to say that this appears in the Haggadah, as I said earlier in the call. And when does it appear? After we eat, in the Hallel section, the praise section, which many of us tend to skip, unfortunately, but there's such great psalms in there and singing. So this is Psalm 118, verse 14. You'll see the words are in English. The Hebrew didn't come out, unfortunately. Oh, and the words are great, just to hum during the day to take with you. Ozi v'zimrat ya vayehi lishua. There's great harmony if you want to unmute. Ozi v'zimrat ya.
Judy, I think everybody should stay muted except for Julia Ostroff.
Yes, stay muted, just harmonize.
Stay muted, but Julia, why don't you unmute and you and Judy could sing together, but the rest of us stay muted.
Excellent, let's try it. Ozi v'zimrat ya vayehi lishua. Ozi v'zimrat ya. It's around. Vayehi lishua. Ozi v'zimrat ya vayehi lishua. Ozi v'zimrat ya vayehi lishua. Ozi v'zimrat ya vayehi lishua. By the way, we'll be singing some more songs, please God, from Haggadah. So you might want to take out your Haggadah, dust it off a little bit, and refresh yourself. The psalm is there and so many other beautiful songs and words, of course.
Happy birthday to Saul today.
Yes, happy birthday to Saul.
So the room will stay open for 10 minutes for those who want to schmooze or talk about the Psalms or just say hello to each other. And then at 5:11, this room will close. Bye-bye, everybody. See you tomorrow. I love studying with you. Blessings to everyone.